You are listening to the Shot Caller Podcast with me, your host, Casey Diaz and Joe Needler. You can find us online at Casey Diaz Author on Facebook, at the Shot Caller Book on Instagram, or at the Shot Caller BK on Twitter. You can always visit us at caseydiaz.net and send an email to info@caseydiaz.net for any speaking engagements or questions you might have. Today we have a special guest, man. This is a friend who actually I never met outside. Out here, we were actually rivals in our neighborhoods, and I met him through Raz. And some of our listeners know how fit I am and how I hit the gym continually. So I met Joel at the gym. Why is everybody laughing? Huh?
No, I just saw a rabbit run by. I wasn't laughing at you.
No, Raz introduced me. We should give a shout out to Build 45. Well, that's where we met with Joel. Raz introduced me to him, and so that's our guest, man, Joel. Joel, good to have you here, brother. I know we were in talks a while back ago, and here we are now. It's an honor, brother, to have you here. Not only just to share your story, but he's also a believer, and just a reformed believer. So hey, make sure the
Experience. Okay.
the theology is on point, because this dude's gone to school in the whole 9 yards, man.
Sit up straight, then. I didn't know.
No laying on the hands and then you falling backwards on your chair, and we can't do that today. We save that for another podcast.
What's your last name? Do you have a last name?
Yeah, it's Aguilar. You want me to spell that for you? Aguilar. Aguilar.
Aguilar.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, bienvenido.
Thank you.
Oh, that's better than me, bro.
Hey, that's all I got, so enjoy it.
Oh, you got? All right, well, that's good.
Well, you have the accent on, so on point.
Pero cuando yo era un niño, vivo en Los Ángeles, California.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, all right.
Yes, that's like Ricardo Montalban. I throw a little bit of him in there whenever I.
All right.
Hey, who was his sidekick?
Sidetracked.
Who was his sidekick, bro?
Who was it? Yeah.
Keep him away from talking about the little people.
Hey, you brought it up. First thing that caught my attention was the sidekick. But we have Joel, man, and we want to hear your story. You growing up in Los Angeles. We want to know, how was it like for you in your early years prior to getting in the whole mix of the gang culture in Los Angeles? What was life back then?
So I come from immigrant parents. Both my parents were immigrants. My dad was Mexican. My mom was Salvadorian. So I was mixed between Mexican and Salvadorian. They were both, they only had a 6th grade education, both my parents. My dad started here working in the fields. Then he became a factory worker. Then he became a security guard. But my grandfather was here during the Bracero times, so he was here in the 40s. Bracero was a time period right after World War II, where they were having a lot of Mexican workers come over here and be part of the workforce. Yeah, so that's kind of like the history of Los Angeles with me. My mom came at a very young age, I would say maybe 17 years old, from El Salvador. And so they met out here, and my dad was 10 years older than my mom, so my dad was already like in his late 20s, early 30s when he met mom. And the youngest of one other sibling that I have, my brother, who's older, like a year and a half older than I am. And so life was pretty much, I was born and raised back then it was referred to as South Central, but it wasn't really South Central. It was like Southwest area. Now they call it the West Adam District, but it's between downtown LA and South Central. So it rests right in between that.
So like what streets? Is it near USC?
Yeah, it's right there on the USC campus, on Hoover and Adams. Yeah. So
not too far from Casey. Casey, that's very close to where.
Yeah, down the street.
Yeah. We share, matter of fact, like a couple of like streets. That was kind of like where I grew up. I went to Norwood Elementary School. Then I went to I went to, I was actually bused to the Valley. Yeah, so I was bused to Robert Frost Junior High School in San Fernando, in Granada Hills. And that was kind of like, the first, I think, because back then I wasn't really, like, I was entertaining gangs, but I wasn't really from a street gang. But I think that was kind of like the first point where I realized that school was like I was way out of my education when I went to Robert Frost. Um, so Robert Frost to me was kind of like, I would say, the point where I made kind of like the the worst decision in my life, because school was so difficult for me. Um, and like I said, it was a school where everything was just different. So I didn't know what brunch was, and we had brunch there, and I was just like, "What the hell is this?" Like all I knew was breakfast and lunch, and so that threw me off. Another thing that threw me off is that we used to have coyotes that used to go into our football field, and I was just like, "Fuck, we're in nature. Like this is like the mountains were like hills were all around us," and so that was shocking to me. Shocking to me was that we also had carpets in our classroom, like, and it was like bungalows. And first time I had a bagel, first time I had like honestly, people that were not brown. So it was like a culture shock for me. And so I realized fast that I was not like in the same part with the rest of the students. Like I had a learning disability, I would say. It was a day where I realized that, hey, I went back home and I remember asking my dad, like, I can't do my homework. I can't do this. I don't understand it. And can you help me? And he looked at it and he's like, I can't help you. And it was right then and then that I realized that I was out of place. This is not the place for me. So I was going back and like I felt disempowered. I think that was the first time where I realized that I was disempowered by it. I didn't feel like honestly I felt like I was worthless in a sense.
And what was it? What was the reason that they actually bust you out? I mean, because usually, from back then, you got busted out if you got kicked out of school, or and then we ended up in schools out here in the valley. But was it just like a program that they put you on, or?
Yeah, it was a pilot program for a lot of
Okay.
people in the inner city. They wanted them to have a better education, so they said, "Hey, let's take them out to, suburbia. Let's take them out to the valley and see."
Did it have anything to do with Prop 13?
I'm not sure if it was Prop 13.
70s, I think, but yours might have been more in the early 80s. I don't know. What
Yeah,
time
yeah.
period do you think?
Yeah, it was the 80s for sure. 85, 85, 84. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was a pilot program for that. I remember. I mean, and just like because my brother was a year older than me, and he was already going there. So my mom was like, "I need you to go where your brother's at. You'll get a better education." Yeah. So it was kind of like I was getting bussed over there when I was coming back into my neighborhood, and I was with my friends. They were going all to the local school, and they were having a different experience than I was. It was just a different narrative, and me not being part of that narrative was also kind of like isolation for me, and I felt alienated. I as it was already, I was alienated because I was in full-blooded Mexican. So I grew up in a neighborhood where it was the majority of them were Mexican, and because I was just half, and like that, I was dealing with a lot of insecurity. It was an identity, issue with me, and so that was something that I wanted to overcome and I wanted to deal with. So the first thing I did was I told my mom, hey, the reason why I'm not making it here in school is because I can't relate to anything here. And so I need to go to the local school, and that local school was John Adams Junior High School. And it was then that I realized that my friends were actually really now getting entertained by the gang lifestyle. And so they would come back and say, oh, we got chased by this gang, and this. And once I knew it, like in a matter of a week, they were all part of the local street gang. And so, me walking, coming from Robert Frost and feeling the way I was feeling, and like domestically at home, like there was no guidance other than your responsibility just to go to school. But both parents were working. I would come back from school, like no one was there, and I just wanted to be in the streets. And me seeing like the street gang and how powerful they look and how kind of they commanded this respect. And think about it, I'm a kid who's disempowered by education, by there's nothing that gives me any validation. So I'm looking at these guys and I'm like, that's what I want. I want that status. I want to be respected. I want to have that power that they have. And so, once I convinced mother to pull me out of Robert Frost and send me to John Adams, then that's when I realized that it was a different world. Then I joined the street gang, and then I started noticing that it was even worse. Like, I couldn't attend school. If I did, I would, just because of the gang violence at the time. So I couldn't go in during first period. I had to go in later. I had to skip first period, because if I went during when school started, most likely I could get jumped or get shot at. So my thing is that I needed all the students to be in school so that I can like come in like unannounced, hop the fence and go into class. And in school I felt safe, but like even there in school, I had to still deal with, rival gangs, and so it was always some tension. And so after school, sixth period was always skipped as well, because I had to get out before they let school out. So and
I had no idea. I've never heard that before. That even though you're still trying to go to school, you got to watch your back,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
how you enter and how you exit. That's quite a life. And you're what, 12 years old, 13 maybe?
I'm 13 turning 14, and so, but like at first like I joined actually a football team. That's what it was. Like, my football team was dead, and it was actually just us having like fun, and it was fun. I had older friends who were playing high school football, and at the time, like, a lot of these gangs were football teams. Like, they were jocks that were playing in like Belmont High School, Manual Arts, Jefferson, Marshall. Like,
Crenshaw.
these were all guys that were playing football, Friday night football, but on the weekends they wanted to gather around and play. And so they started this, like these clubs. They started like these football clubs, and that's what they were. And that's how it started. It was all fun at first. Then, from one day to another, it just got really serious. And so we were kind of like swallowed up by the major like street gang that was there, which was the one that they were actually a street gang. So, from football, from playing football to just, everything being like play, then it just got serious with like guns and knives, and so it progressed from just play to that. And once that kicked in, then I think I got a little bit more involved with the street gang because of just knowing that the stakes were really high. Like, then I started seeing people like getting shot, people dying, and so at that point, okay, now this is serious. Where do I go from here?
That time, Casey, that overlaps with when you were still on the street, right? 1985, 86, right?
Yeah, I'm still on the street, and you don't want. I don't know if this happened in your neighborhood, and I would imagine so, but I remember growing up, and if like you were a kid that was like an ESL, you did not want to be in an ESO class. Like, that was like you were you were gonna get picked on from the gate, and so everybody, which surprises me because our parents spoke Spanish and the whole nine yards, and that was the language to speak at home. But yet, when you step out, you're almost like, if you're not speaking English, you were made fun of by the rest of your schoolmates or whatever. Did you have that experience as well?
Yeah, I had that experience. I had a speech therapist actually
Oh,
when
really?
when I was in elementary school, because I couldn't pronounce the S. I would like slur my S's. That's how I would. And so I had a speech therapist to kind of like show me how to pronounce the certain letters, vowels. And so, yeah, I mean, that kind of all buys into, or it adds to like this image and this identity that you suffer from. I've never felt American. I never felt Mexican. I never felt Salvadorian. I felt like I was just an alien.
It's like, who am I?
Like, where do I fit in? You know, like, who am I? Like, are you really like, so I really suffer from that. Like, that was really, really my insecurity, my biggest. So I overcompensated because I wanted people to see me. I wanted people to kind of like, I wanted to be accepted. And it wasn't, and I think that's kind of like, and dysfunctional home in a sense that, my dad was an alcoholic. He was a functional alcoholic. He would go to work, come back on Friday nights and get drunk. And to me, that was like, to my family, it was like a torment, but to me, it was like the happiest moments of my life. Because, to me, it was like my dad was a big Mexican. He was 6'3". And
That's a tall dude,
yeah,
man.
he was a big Mexican. So they used to call him, his handle was El Grande, So I was the diminutive. I was El Grandecillo. So my dad would go out on Friday nights. He would take me, and that was fun for me because that meant my dad was going out to go play poker with his friends, and that meant that I would be with him at all hours of the night. That meant candy, sodas, chips, and just being around like older men playing cards, talking about their pueblo, talking about Mexico, and then they would bring out the guns and they would shoot. So at a very young age, I was exposed to fire guns. I was exposed to like, this was kind of like, they were raised that way. So it was like, okay, I remember the first time I shot my dad's gun. It was a 357 Magnum. I was maybe 11 years old. And I just remember that I was scared.
That's a big gun for a little 11-year-old.
Yeah, and I remember like, just hearing the pop scare me, terrified me, and I just remember my dad saying, "Órale," and then everyone, "Ándale, grandecillo, jálele," and I remember me like grabbing this gun and like shaking, and my dad just cupping my hand with the gun, and my dad, he had big hands, and I remember me taking the first shot, and really, that was the day that I kind of like lost fear of what the pop and the gun, yeah. And so, at that age too, he taught me how to drive, just because, that meant me taking him and his friends to the liquor store to go buy beer, and, at a young age. So, it's kind of like all the circumstances were there. It was like the perfect circumstances for this lifestyle. And so by the time I joined the gang, I know how to drive, I know how to shoot a gun, and it was just perfect. So think about it, this is a young kid who is suffering from identity crisis, insecurity, feeling very disempowered by education, and just,
Well, also, if I can interrupt, Joel, I'm sorry, but what would happen if you didn't join the gang and you still lived in that neighborhood? I mean, wouldn't you stand out?
yeah, I think I would have. I don't know what, like, that's always because my brother never joined the gang. That's weird.
Wow.
Like, there was people in my neighborhood that didn't join the gang, and my brother was one of them. So if you were to ask my mom, like, what was different about Joel, she would tell you, he was a knucklehead since he was a kid. He was very precocious. So my brother, even at age 14, 15, he was still playing with his toys.
Oh,
I let that go when I was 8 years old. I didn't want to play with toys. I wanted to be out. I wanted to play basketball. I wanted to play football. I wanted to go swimming. So, that's just what it was. Yeah, I gravitated to my dad, manly things my brother didn't. But then again, my brother had a child when he was 16 years old. He had his first kid. And I think that kind of like also changed him a little bit, but he's been working since the age of 12, 13. I never had a job like that. I remember my first job was a summer job. My friend's dad used to do landscaping, and I remember he's like, okay, for the summer, you want to make some extra money? I'm like, sure, let's go. And so I remember, like cutting lawns in Beverly Hills, and I'm like, oh no, this is not for me. Like, I'm not gonna do this.
Yeah, this is work.
Yeah, this is not for me. This is work. This is hard money. I'm like, and it once again, it added to kind of like, this weight that I was carrying, with this insecurity and this identity crisis that I was going through. And so my thing was like, no, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna either, rob someone who sells dope and has a lot of money, or I'm gonna sell dope, and, this is not me. So I think I realized that at a young age. And one of the other things, the aspiration of college was never there. So my thing is, okay, there's two ways. It's either prison or, either I'm gonna die. Honestly, at that point, I didn't think I was gonna make it to my 18th birthday. Like that's just the way I lived. And
And one of the things that I always noticed in circles that we came from, whether you were in a Mexican family or a Salvadorian family, a Hispanic family, you know, usually it's always a male figure that gives you like the first drink, and you're like 8 or 9 years old, and all of a sudden, here, taste this, and it's almost like it's a machismo thing. It's it's like a rite of passage to a young boy, and I remember I didn't have a great relationship at all with my father, but I remember him like there's a meme out there on social network that the last best generation was Generation X, and it has a picture of a dad and a little 4-year-old sipping on a bottle of beer, that kind of thing. But did that happen in your household as well, or
no, it didn't.
really?
Yeah, it didn't. It's weird how it happened with me. Honestly, I didn't. The first time I drank beer was at a ditching party.
I haven't heard that word in a long time.
It was
Ditching party.
we were skipping school. We skipped school and
What is that?
it's skipping school in someone's home.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
But you invite like all your homeboys or all your friends,
Yeah.
and it's a party while your parents are not there, and it starts 9 in the morning, whatever it is, and you got to clean up the pad before your parents get there, and it's a mess.
Yeah, so that's how it started with me drinking, but I was never really a drinker. I was more of like I was a pothead. So I was introduced to pot by an older Harpies member named Negro. I remember sitting down in front of the park and I was ditching school. I was not in school, and he was selling heroin at the time. Like my street gang was known for selling heroin. And it was early in the morning. It was like maybe 6:30 in the morning, and that's when most of the people who use heroin come and buy heroin. And I remember he sitting down and he goes, what's up, Joe?" And I'm like, "What's going on?" He's like, and he said it in Spanish, "Que fumar un gallo?" Like, "You want to smoke a joint?" And I'm like, "All right." And at the time, I'm like,
You had no clue.
I had no clue what it was. And so he rolled it. He showed me how to roll it. This is how you do it. And he sparked it up, and I remember like taking the first hit, and I was just like, "Whoa, what is this?" And that was the first time I got introduced to weed, and that was like my whole thing. My whole thing was weed, and then I used a little bit of heroin as I grew up. Like most of like my friends that grew up used, if it was a marijuana, they usually used heroin and also PCP. PCP was big, but there was a generation before me. Like I noticed that the guys that wanted to use PCP didn't like the downers. They just wanted to kind of like, I don't know. PCP was weird. That was a weird drug for me. But yeah, and so that's how I was introduced to that. In fact, when I was like with my dad, like I said, it was weird because I stopped kissing my dad on the lips at the age of 12. Like my dad to me was like the superhero. He was a big man, and so like I really like, to me my dad was everything. And like I said, I went with him everywhere. But it was weird because he was the nicest, like endearing person when he was drunk, and like during the week he was just very serious. And so the affirmations that I used to get from him were confusing. He would still talk to me as if I was 6 or 7 years old when I was 12, and like that's not what I wanted to hear at the time. But I'm thinking I'm growing up, I'm becoming a man, and like I was, like this was kind of like weird for me. But that's how my dad, he always treated me like his baby, and I get it to a point, but I never heard the affirmation of, "You're doing good in school. Let me see your grades." Like that was never there. So it wasn't what I needed at the time. Looking back now in hindsight, I can see like where the problem was. Like all that was building up to me, kind of like even to a point where once I really became a full-fledged like street gang member, like I was ashamed of my dad. Like to me, it's like, man, no, like I wanted like the gang member to be my dad. I wanted to be like the older guy that was cool, and I wanted him to be my dad. And I had friends whose parents were like cool. They were the parents that used to smoke weed with their kids. You know, they were already a second generation of gang members, and that's what I wanted. I wanted parents like that, not immigrant parents who, like, to me, like, I looked down on my parent, you know, and I was ashamed. I was ashamed of them, and that kind of like fed into me, you know, not wanting to, you know, listen to anything that they had to say. At that point, I just became very rebellious. I let myself like fully embrace, you know, this gang culture, and I was gonna make a name for myself. I was gonna become someone, and so that led me to committing a crime when I was 17 years old, 1991. I was I already had contact with like the police and juvenile hall, and so that just allowed me to gain more status. So, you know, again, it feeds into this image that I wanted to like portray, and that gave me status. And so coming out with that, I wanted more of that, and it led me to me committing a crime at the age of 17, 1991. It was a robbery murder, which I didn't get apprehended for that crime, but it was there. And it wasn't until like 3 years later when I commit another crime that I get arrested, and this other crime comes, and now they're like, okay, we have the evidence. By this point now, I already knew that it was over for me. And so, and once I get charged for this 1991 case, they're going with me, like they're seeking, you know, the maximum punishment. So it was a murder robbery. And I'll say his name was Gregorio Antonio Lamont. That was my victim's name. It was a robbery that, you know, it was just supposed to be us. We knew that he was selling, this was the information I got, is that he was selling narcotics, or he was selling like rocks at the time, and that we were just gonna go and rob him, and that's it. But as everything, you know, it just didn't work out that way. So we didn't even rob him because he had nothing. So we didn't even have time to rob him. So as soon as it was me and two other friends of mine's. When we go and it's time for us to like to go inside, like we knew that he had the drugs inside his apartment, and we met him at the hallway, and we didn't even get into his apartment because as soon as we reached him, my friends let off a shot him in the face, and so he passed away. He died. Oh, actually, he was murdered, and we ran, and it wasn't until like I said, 3 years later that they actually cracked the case, and we all got arrested for it. I was already arrested for something else, so once that came, they sought the maximum punishment, which was life without the possibility of parole, and that's what I got.
Casey, can you comment on that? Because Casey said the laws changed between the time that when you went in. Is that right?
Yeah, so I went there a few years before Joel, and you get caught. That 4 year difference made all the difference. I mean the laws at that point are very heavy, and they're trying to wash everybody up. Meaning they want heavy sentences like life without parole, the death penalty, and which I'm surprised that didn't go after that, because usually if it's a robbery homicide, they want the death penalty almost right off the bat. So those 4 years made a lot of difference, and everybody that got busted in my year, to me, I look back at it now and I go, not that we got away with it, but one would say you got away with it because you only served, not even a decade, and you're out again. And this, man, I'll let him share it as far as how much time you served, but that's a long time, man. And you weren't even expected to get out.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't want to mess up. Yeah. I want you to tell your story, because it's an amazing story, and it's a story that only God could have, intervened and done something in Joel's life. But yeah, man. So here you are, and I mean,
Yeah, so because I committed this crime when I was 17 years old, they didn't have a death penalty for juveniles at the time. California never had that. Other states did, but not California. So it was a discretionary sentence. So because it was a special allegation, which means it was a special circumstance case. I was my only sentence was life without the possibility of parole. The judge had discretion to lower that to 25 years to life, but in theory he had it, but in practice they never did it. And he sentenced me to the maximum, which was life without the possibility of parole.
Well, what came to your mind when you're hearing, your with your counsel, and he's telling you this is what they're pushing?
You know what? Like at the time, you're not really.
You're a kid, right?
Yeah,
and you don't care.
You don't care. And
that's the reality of it.
Yeah, and you're thinking like, I'm not going to spend life here.
Yeah.
Like, those words really don't
penetrate.
Yeah, they really don't mean what they actually. Yeah, and it's not till later in life where I realized that, hey, this is where I'm going to die. Like this is. And they meant life without the possibility of parole. That was life without the possibility of parole. And then, once you walk into the prison system and you see people who have been in prison for 20, 30, even some 40 years, and they're old now, you realize like, hey.
You got some B numbers, some A numbers.
This is where I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And this is
the end.
Yeah, this is the end. But, the thing with me is that, God touched my life in a cell early on in my I was still fighting my case when God touched my life.
So you're still in the halls or in county jail?
I'm in the county jail.
I'm
in the county jail, and God touched my life in a 6-man cell. I still remember, and I'm gonna give you just a description. So it was me walking into a cell, and I was the only one in that cell, but it was dirty, it was cold, there was a bunch of graffiti, and I remember that the lights were dim because there's not good lighting, and me there in reflection, just thinking about how I ruined my whole life. And in that moment, like, I started to like replay my life, and I replayed also the crime, and like everything just came before me so clear. And I just remembered that that's how I felt. I felt like that room. I felt dark. I felt dirty. I felt like empty, alone. And in that moment, I realized, another thing, like I remembered the reflection of me growing up, also having evangelicals come into my home, knocking at the door, sharing Christ with me. I remember the 7-Day Advent Church, the corner of my house. I remember me going camping with them to like summer camp. I remember the Baptist church also, and I remember like hearing and I remember them saying, hey, if they were preaching Christ to me, but at the time it didn't make sense. But I still remember vividly in that cell, I remember them saying to me that if you confess your sins to Jesus, that he will forgive you. And at that moment, I remember also my catechism, because I grew up Catholic. So I remember my catechism classes. I remember, to me, it was vivid, that crucifixion and the words that if you confess your sins, Christ will forgive you. And I was dealing with a lot of conviction, I think. I was dealing with guilt. I was dealing with the fact that, I had participated in a crime that took someone's life. And I just needed to be absolved from that. And I remember me getting up from that cell, like feeling this desperate need to wanting to have forgiveness. And I remember I walked to the back of the cell and I just dropped to my knees and I started crying, and I just started asking God, if he was there, if he was true, to forgive me, that I'm sorry. And in me saying that prayer, I still remember when I got up from that prayer, that something had changed. And I knew it instantly. It wasn't it was a progression. To me, it was instant. I knew something had happened. Something inside me had changed. And although I knew that maybe this is the place where I was going to spend the rest of my life, I knew that I had forgiveness, and if I were to die, I would be okay with God. I don't know why. I can't explain it. It was just a feeling. It's almost like the feeling when I said, um, when you move out to a neighborhood that's calm, it's almost like, it's like there's a feeling of safety. I don't know how to explain it, but you just feel it that you're safe. In LA, I never felt that. So it's almost that feeling. For some reason, I felt that something had changed. And I felt it first, and then I just kind of like walked through it. Now I just wanted to know, like, what had happened to me? Like, what happened to me? Something happened to me. This was a spiritual awakening that I've never experienced anything like it before.
You still remember what module it was?
You know what? It was me going to court, and they put me in this holding tank.
Oh no, holding tank.
Yeah, but it was weird. It was just like it was like a big tank, and I just remember that was the place. And I remember me getting in the bus, and like on my way back to the county jail, I just remember that this was like, I was different.
It was different. Yeah.
Yeah. I was
Wow,
different.
man. And like, so this is an experience or an encounter rather with God and you in a cell. No one really, like, yeah, you remember the people knocking on your door, those encounters back then, but to me that's incredible that you're in there just so that we paint the picture of what the county jail looks like and that processing. uh, it's not really the best place to become born again, because it's rocking and rolling in there.
Yeah.
It's a riot at any given time. Somebody's getting got. Uh, there's moving all over the place. It's not like you could walk out of a module, go to another one, or you don't have that type of you know I'm trying to look for the word, like the like to have a place to go to, and all right, well, I'm just gonna go ahead and program, and I'm gonna buy my own business. It's not like that at all in the county jail. So that's a dangerous place to go. Hey, by the way, fellas, I'm done here.
Yeah.
There is no. I hate using this word, but there is no protection at all.
Yeah.
You're in the mix of everything. So that's incredible to me, man. And you're what, 17, 18 at this point?
Yeah, 19.
19. Wow, man. That's heavy, Joel, man.
Yeah.
That's a commitment right there.
Yeah, it was. And I think it kind of like, in a sense, I've always been, or older people have always been drawn to me. I was precocious as a child, but even at my later teens, like I was always like the older people always gravitated to me. They used to say, "Oh, you're young, but you have an old soul," and I it was just like that. So me going into the county jail, and I remember the first thing I did was separate. That's the first thing I did, and I became almost like a pariah in prison, in jail. So it was just like, that dude's weird. He's over there reading the Bible all the time, like I don't know. So he's a homie, but he's weird. And that's the homie from, and they would say my neighborhood, and he's like, but he's weird. And I remember all these older guys used to come, and they would want to talk to me. They would want to talk to me about the Bible. What are you reading and stuff like that. And so then it became clear to me, okay, this is what I needed now, is to fellowship. And like the only people I could fellowship in the county jail were blacks. They were the only ones that were actually reading the Bible.
The Protestant servant.
Yeah. So that's weird, So my experience in the county jail was weird because, as you said, there was, it was they still had green lights, and neighborhoods still had green lines. People were getting, stabbed and beat, riots. And even through all that, like, God saw me through all that. And I can tell you, like, testimonies where riot was about to break off, and we're in the middle, and I remember, like, us praying, like, really getting into prayer.
Wow.
and God just intervening and not allowing the riot to happen. So there was a lot of stuff. Like, at the very beginning of my faith, I remember I saw a lot of signs from God, like signs that you would say. I know nowadays, I'm not that I'm skeptical, but nowadays I would be like, I don't know if this would happen, but like, I just remember seeing so many signs that God was with me.
And you know what? I think, Joel, it's that I think it's almost like that to everyone that comes to Christ in the beginning. It's like we almost need to see something that's not natural in order for our faith to be built. Because think about it. You're like an infant. When you come to Christ, you're like the Bible refers to as a baby in Christ. That baby needs to see security. That baby needs to see that there's a father figure, that there's protection from that father, and I think that that's why he allows for us to see certain things. And you could call it supernatural, you could call it, a miracle, you could call it whatever. But I think that that's why he allows those things early on in our salvation, because we do need that. We need to see the hand of God like visible in our lives through events like that, because you think about it, uh, every single one of us have seen a riot, and it just takes off. I mean, you could feel it when it's about to happen. You're in the mix of it, and the next thing you know, I mean, it's there's nowhere to run. You're gonna partake, and if you don't, you're gonna get dealt with, or your whole neighborhood will get a green light. So to hear that, and you're in the middle of that, that is a miracle.
Yeah,
that's a miracle, hands down. And I don't even care what anybody else would say about that. That's a miracle. One, it's that ride didn't take off. Two, that your life is spared throughout all this time in there. I'm sure that you saw many rides happening, and you're sitting here in a podcast many years later with no injury.
Yeah, unscathed.
Unscathed. Yeah, it's like, what? How does that happen?
Yeah, how does
wow,
that
man.
Yeah.
That's the God we serve. That's simple as that.
And so even like, and I'm still going to court.
Yeah.
And once I get found guilty and I get sentenced, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to prison, and I know that I'm going to maximum security prison because with my sentence there's no
level 3 or anything.
There is no minimum security. So I already know that this is where I'm going. But I had enough experience with God, knowing what God had done for me in the county jail, that for me to go to prison was, it was already like, okay, I've seen God's hand at work, and I know that He's going to look out for me. Even though I had the sentence of life without the possibility of parole, something inside me always believed that something was going to happen, that God was going to do something in my life. And He did. He kind of like molded me in prison. He gave me a new hunger for like His word, gave me a new hunger for like education. And so prison was a very lonely place for me, in the sense that I was, again, the pariah. I was like, a lot of people wouldn't relate to me because prison becomes like a culture in itself. It's an underworld, and like you have the worst of the worst there, and so the last thing they want is someone who is like counterculture. Anyone that like goes against the grain is it's just not welcome. But unbeknownst to them, that greater was He that was in me, right, than he that was out in the world. And I think that was kind of like the benefit, that I go into prison, I go into maximum security, and most of these prisons are like locked down. Most of these prisons don't have a lot of program. I remember, and I was like I said, it was only in Christ that I actually kind of like knew my identity now. Like, it's weird how I kind of come to this notion of regaining my identity in Christ, like knowing that I'm a Christian now. This is who I am. And so I didn't see like race, although I was forced, but I didn't see it. Like, to me, if you were a northerner and you were a Christian, you're my Christian brother. Black, you're my Christian brother. And so it kind of gave me a belonging that I didn't have. And like I said, my first, we would say 12 years in prison were spent just reading, and spent like working in law libraries, working in chapel. And I remember like everyone would buy TVs. Oh, I'm gonna get a TV and I'm gonna watch TV. And like the thing what I did is like, no, I'm not gonna buy a TV, I'm gonna buy books. I remember my first 5 books that I bought, all heavy books. John Calvin's Christian Institute of the Christian Religion, John Hobbes' Systematic Theology. I bought also Josh McDowell, Defense for like Christianity, and I also bought a commentary on Galatians by Martin Luther. and I had a church history book.
Man, so you got
Yeah.
into the tulip mix
Yeah.
from the gate.
From the gate. From
No
the
Benny
gate.
Hinn, no nothing.
I did when I was when I was in juvenile hall. I did, like, that was my faith. Like, my
Yeah.
faith was a lot more like charismatic, a lot
Pentecostal.
Pentecostal. And just because I seen a lot of like I said, I seen a lot of miracles, and
Yeah.
so, like, to me that's kind of what led me. But for some reason, once I went to prison, it was me. I remember listening to a radio station and listening to. I remember the radio station was because I got bused to High Desert.
Mm-hmm.
I did my time there, and I remember there was a Christian station called the Pilgrims radio station, and it was all Reformed. And I remember the first time I heard I think it was Lloyd Jones, and I was like, man, who is this? And I just remember, like, the message was like so compelling to me, and I was just like, and so I would hear that every day. I would hear all these, preachers, and we used to get the 10th Presbyterian Church out of Philadelphia, and I remember his name was, I think it was, he passed away though. I used to hear him, and so this is, I just, for some reason, that scripture that says, "My sheep hear my voice and they follow."
Yeah.
I heard that, and I just gravitated to, like, reading, and that's what I did most of my time. That's when I got into kind of like the intellectual side of, like, Christianity.
You know what I find interesting is, you shared earlier how you just didn't feel like you fit in a school setting. You didn't like school.
Yeah.
That wasn't your thing. And then fast forward, and now it's become your thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna read. I'm gonna skip the TV. I want some books in the cell, and I'm just gonna immerse in literature. It's so fascinating what God does. Obviously, you have the Holy Spirit once you become born again, and He leads you into all truth. He becomes your teacher. I think a lot of people miss out on that. Like, I talk to many believers, and it's almost like they skip over that part for some reason. It just seems like that, where the Holy Spirit is the teacher. He is the one that opens up your mind, helps you to actually understand what you're reading, and then that takes effect in your heart, and obviously then your actions, right? But that's amazing, man. That to know that here you are, fast forward, and what you want to do is something that you didn't like from the beginning, but now you're cool with that. So what happens after that? I mean, so you're getting books, and then what?
And then I end up going to Tehachapi State Prison. Tehachapi had a beautiful chapel, had the most amazing Christian library that I've seen. Even to this, like, even in other, like, institutions that I was, Tehachapi was the best Christian library that I've ever stepped into.
Did you run into Ruben Riveros? He was a Baptist
Minister.
pastor. Yeah,
Pastor, yeah.
That was in there.
Yeah, Ruben, yeah.
You remember him?
Yeah, I remember him. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I remember him. Matter of fact, the chaplain there was, like, he was like a homie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember him. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think his name. There was another pastor by the name of Joel too, and he was there. But yeah, that was the place where I kind of, I would say I was forged in, like, this cave, and not to use the analogy of Plato, but, like, I was forged in this cave, and education became big for me. I mean, and I seen, like, God teach people how to read through the Bible.
Yeah.
So, like, it's just weird how through the Bible, through Christianity, like you said, I had a new thirst, a new hunger. Yeah. Just thank God for my education too as a kid that they taught me how to read. So, thank God for that. Not everything was missed, or lost. There were some things that I did gain, and that's I appreciate that, and so I just got this hunger for, like, even history, and something that Benito Juarez says, that he wished that Mexico was conquered. Benito Juarez was the first indigenous president of Mexico, and he wished that Mexico would have been conquered by Protestants, because then he believed that the Indians would read more their Bibles than rely on candles and images, and that's huge. That's huge because like what we like our heritage here is, and I say Protestantism is the fact that we have the Bible and we need to read it. So that was beautiful. So me spending my time in prison was always working in the chapel, being in the Christian libraries, also working in law libraries and reading law books and opinions, and that became also an educational part in me. I was always also into the arts, another thing that creative writing, and so I had this hunger to wanting to educate myself, and so the only thing that we had, the only medium was reading. Later on in my prison life, I was able to take some college courses, and then I started kind of taking, when this started becoming more of a possibility, because it was just talks. I remember 2003, it was me being already in prison for 15 years, and I got this letter from this organization that said, hey, we are gathering signatures so that we can change the law where we as a country don't punish our youth to life without the possibility of parole. At the time, there was only two countries that practiced this punishment, which is the U.S. and the other one was a Islamic country under Sharia law. So it was, to them, it was very draconian. How is it that we live in a country that is the most progressive and liberal country in the world, and yet punish our youth to your worst act is defining you're incorrigible, you're unredeemable, and so.
When I look at your story, you're 1 year, because you're 17 when you went in, and I think for that 1 year made that big difference, because if it would have fell on your 18th birthday, you might have not gotten that letter, because you're an adult right there. That would have cut you off. So that 1 year or whatever, couple of months.
It was days.
It was days.
It was 12. I was 12 days.
Are you serious?
Shy of my 18th birthday.
So because of those 12 days, this happens. Bro, that just gave me goosebumps, man. That's something else, bro.
It was 12 days. In fact, that was the argument that the DA used when I went back to get my sentence recalled.
Yeah.
Well, you have to follow, so a law comes in, and it's a law that says that if you were sentenced to life without the possibility of parole and you were under the age of 18, you have now a right to petition the court to see if you get a recall of your sentence and get sentenced to a possibility. So when I went back to court, the DA made that argument. He's like, Your Honor, he was only 12 days short of his 18th birthday. Why should he benefit from this law? And the judge looked at her and said, well, we have to have a mark of demarcation. That's 18 is the age. He was still 17. That argument doesn't work.
Yeah.
But she made that argument.
Wow,
that
man.
He gets to benefit from this. Yeah. And there's people, I met people they turned 18 the day they committed their crime.
And that's it.
They didn't benefit from this law.
Yeah. Wow, man.
Yeah.
That's dude, that's heavy right there, man. That's heavy. So, and just for our listeners to know, so you're on your 15th year.
Yeah, 15th.
It's a long time, man. In an institution, and so far you've been to 2 state prisons at this moment, and you're staying there. How does that? You come from High Desert, and now you're in Tehachapi.
I'm in Tehachapi, and by this time I'm in Calipatria.
So this is now your third state prison.
This is my third state prison, yeah.
Here's what I want some of you guys out there that you're listening to this. We get used to staying in one place, and you start to know the program. People know you, and I don't want to say you get comfortable in prison, but you already know the routine. So every time you move from one place to another, it's almost like you're learning and they're learning you it's like starting from scratch almost. So you're going to Calipatria now, and now what?
So I'm in Calipatria, and Calipatria was another culture shock for me. It was a different experience just because I'm coming in High Desert, and all the COs over there in High Desert are all white. 6'5", 6'4",
Yeah, big dudes.
you know, yeah, races, and you know, I'm experiencing racism like at its worst,
Yeah.
like, and so I come to Tehachapi, and Tehachapi, you start seeing, you know, things a little bit different. You start seeing, you know, like maybe a Mexican CO, and
A lot of the CEOs
yeah,
are living in El Centro.
yeah.
And
Now when I go to Calipatra,
Raleigh.
it's like I'm in like Tijuana. Like these CEOs are speaking Spanish now.
Yeah,
I'm like, what?
right.
So a lot of them are actually field workers, you know, from
Yeah.
Coachella. You know,
Okay.
so they were field workers there in Calexico. They have a lot of field workers, and you know, yeah. So I come to Calipatra, and it's just like, man, it's different.
Yeah.
And but Calipatra, I spent 10 years in Calipatra. Calipatra was the worst place that I ever like did any of my time. It was very violent. It was very violent. For some reason, Calipatra is always known for even like having riots. Like my yard was known for having riots with COs a lot. That's when like the East Coast Crips went into the program office, stabbed the sergeant, and you know, all hell broke loose. And that was the yard I was in. B yard was always known for more violence within inmates. C yard was known for like also like inmates, but riots in B yard with the blacks and Mexicans, you know. So it was weird. Like, and like you said, you know, you're coming into a different institution. They have different rules. Like every yard has its own rules, you know. So yeah, me coming to Calipatra was also, again, 10 years there. I knew that I couldn't go to a minimum facility. I couldn't go to a level 3. I couldn't go to a level 2. So my stay at this point, I started in like level 4, 180, which is a higher security prison. Then you go to a level 4, 270, which is, and the only difference is that, you know, in the 180 is just more control movement.
Yeah.
The sections are more contained. You know, they have a wall of partition. So you go into a building, they have A, B, and C pod. They just have a partition there. They have a kitchen, so you never step out.
Yeah.
Like once you go to a 270, then you
That's
step.
it. You're stuck there.
Yeah, you step out. But that was gonna be my home, like a level 4.
Well, you were at that facility and it was such a tough place to be. Were you able to establish spiritual habits, Bible studies, quiet time for reading? I mean, how was your spiritual life while you were there?
You know what? I think Calipatra was where I kind of like flourished, and you know, I started preaching the word. I started teaching the word. I was actually the interpreter of when we had a prisoner who was actual like the pastor. He was the one that was bringing the sermons on Sundays, and he would do it in Spanish, but I would translate for him in English. So he had an interpreter. So we had a dual service there, and so then little by little I started kind of like everything. And this is how it worked. Like I felt like God was forging me in High Desert in Tehachapi. So when I came to Calipatra, it's like I hit the ground running. It's like I was so seasoned and ready for it, you know. And I remember I still have it. I wish I would have brought, like, I have like sermons like type like that big. Like I have manila folders of just sermons that I did every weekend. I interpreted.
You're like Joe MacArthur at that point, bro.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, so you know, so I get really involved in the chapel there, and I remember, like Calipatra gets 100, and I remember when I was there, 119, 118 degrees, and for Mexicans, it's mandatory for you to be in the yard, even if it's like Super Bowl or whatever. You're gonna be in the yard. You're gonna be out in the yard at 100. So the only refuge they had was chapel service. And I would bring all these guys into the service, and like, we had a full service every Sunday, and until the enemy kind of like realized, hey, like.
So did they give you a nickname? Did you have a nickname?
No, not no nickname.
Pastor Joel, or what would they call you?
No, they wouldn't call me pastor. I was kind of like the co-pastor, you would say, but I wasn't really the pastor. But yeah, I was, as far as me having the ability to really, you know, like preach and teach, and also had a good relationship, because I worked in the chapel with a lot of Muslims, so I would have some, you know, lively debates with them about, you know, the Bible and our faith.
Lively debates.
Yeah. So I even became a defender of the faith.
There you go.
How long were you at that particular prison?
I was there 10 years. And that's kind of like where the first time I started So I remember like there was this charismatic brother who believed, he would say, I believe in the full gospel. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And he would say, well, I believe in signs and wonders. And I remember like there was a riot that happened well, before that, when this law was being like, it was the first time like people were hearing about, oh, they're thinking about changing the law for juveniles, for people who committed the crimes under the age of 18. And I remember he looked at me, and he was a black brother, and he looked at me and he said, brother, God's going to let you go. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, God's going to create a law to let you out, and I think that this is this law.
Oh, wow.
See, and this is why you need us, bro. This is why you need our Pentecostal spin on these things.
Look,
bro.
I'm not gonna lie. Like, you know, even when my life was in danger, because it did get to that point where they were thinking about like stabbing me, removing me out of the yard because I didn't participate in the riot, you know, and I didn't participate in them boarding up. You know, I remember me going to them, and they would like lay hands on me and pray, like earnestly pray, you know, and I'm like, look, brother, I don't want to be presumptuous, but you know, I need prayer. Like I'm dealing with this, like, to me, it was, I mean, I was dealing with fear, but at the same time, I was dealing with, well, you know, I dedicate my life to God. And from, as far as I knew, like, God had always, you know, took care of me. So, you know, and I remember that, like, I would go with them and they would pray earnestly for me, and like nothing would happen. I remember he said, Joel, don't worry. God will remove a whole yard for you. And I was like thinking, this guy's crazy. I'm thinking, this guy's crazy. You know, I mean, not that I doubt God, but this is what happened. So a riot happens. It was only like the blacks were locked down. It was Mexicans, white. We were out in the yard. I remember it was like 9:30 in the morning. I'm exercising at where they have the pull-ups, and they stabbed someone right next to, because Calipatra was divided by a gate. So on the other exercise room, a Mexican gets stabbed. And like, they're just stabbing, like they really want to put this guy down. And so, you know, shots get fired and they're still going at it. The COs go there, they stop the stabbing, they find the knives, they find everything. And one of the sergeants says, search the whole weight room. This one and the other one. And where I'm at, well, I'm thinking this is, you know, all right, they're going to search us. They strip search us. And one of the guys in my yard had a knife. And so when they're strip searching him, he gets the knife and he stabs the cop.
Oh,
that's it.
Now we have a riot.
Yeah.
Now we have a riot with the comms. Now I see just the guy in the tower. They're just saying shoot, 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 and they're just, people are jumping over the fence. Like it's just full out riot. And I remember just getting down, me praying and asking God, like, man, see me through this. It's weird. CEOs come, everyone's already, like, this starts at 9. So this is 4 p.m. in the evening.
Yeah.
We're there, you know, on the yard.
Zip-tied.
Yeah, zip-tied, you know, facing down. And I remember 2 officers coming. This guy was the only one that didn't get in.
You haven't read my book? You need to read the book, bro.
So they pick me up from the yard and they take me back to my cell. Everybody's looking at me. Where are you going? I'm like, I don't know. And they take me to my cell. Everyone from that yard goes to the home.
that is awesome.
And I'm thinking, like, man, he did remove a whole yard for me.
So what do you think about Pentecostalism now? I'm just saying, bro. You know, I'm gonna shout out to all our Pentecostal believers out there. You know, we're a team, brother.
He parted the Red Sea for you, man.
Yeah, he did. You know, to this day, you know, and I use that in my parole board hearing, bro.
Yeah, man,
I use
that's
that.
awesome.
I have pictures and everything, because you know, some of the guys got charged for attempted murder, and a lot of them got convicted. You know, and they send me the pictures, like, hey, and I have pictures of me prone in the yard, and like, because they didn't have no record that I was there. It's weird.
Wow.
Like they didn't never make them, like they didn't know if it wasn't me getting all this information for them, they would have never known. They would have never known. They would have never known that I was part of a riot where the officers came and said he wasn't involved.
Let's get him out.
Wow.
Yeah. See, this is the thing. Like Joe, obviously Joe knows the book inside out. I'll talk about Joe, the co-host here. a similar thing happened to me, very similar. And this is the first time I'm hearing you tell. You've never told that story to me, just so that everybody knows out there. But something very similar happened to me. So, and to me, it's like those moments. There's no denying that God takes care of His own. It doesn't matter where you're at. Doesn't matter. You could be out here in a in a tight space, with your back against the wall. God will come through on your end, like on His end. Like He's gonna protect His people, regardless of I think I think it's so important to understand that when God says something in the Bible, that He's for you and He's not against you. He'll never leave you nor forsake you. That's not like small talk to God. Those aren't just normal words. Those are words that carry power and strength. And we can depend on God to come and rescue us and save us. Salvation is a whole package deal. It's not just, you're saved from going to hell and then that's it. No, there's blessing involved. There's Him taking care of you. It involves Him feeding you, sheltering you. It's a whole blessing package. And this is why, I believe that we're in the times right now that the church is coming together. And what I mean by that is we're dropping the labels, and I'm seeing more and more of this, at large here, that a lot of churches where they're getting good, solid biblical teaching. It's not that we're dropping the labels in saying, we're going to do away with this denomination or that. But when we look at Christianity, what matters the most? Well, it's the basics. It's the elementary stuff. Do we believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? Yeah. Whether you're a Calvinist or, whether you're a Pentecostal, whatever you are. Is Christ the Son of God? Yes. Did He die for your sins? Yes. Was He buried and rose again on the third day? Yes. Did He resurrect and is He sitting at the right hand of power and majesty? Yes. Then that right there makes us brothers. And I think it's so senseless on all corners when we can't get along, and because of certain issues. You believe this way or I believe that way. It's senseless, and I think that the enemy has used this for a long time to separate even the church and divide it. When I love the story, man. I'm so glad that God reminded you of the story to share it, because I've learned a lot from tulip believers and Reformed brothers, and I've learned a lot from Pentecostals. We both have so many similarities in that God saved us, that God came through on our behalf. I want if you could share with us. I mean, some of you that are out there listening right now, you heard Joel say, I was here 10 years. I was here. This is my 15th year, and you're racking up years in this place. How many years altogether?
21.
21 years in prison, straight. It's a long time. It's 2 decades, brother.
So it came a point in Calipatria where it was time for me to move. I didn't want to be in, I knew that I was going to die there.
Yeah.
And I remember, again, this Pentecostal brother comes to me and he was black. He was like one of my good brothers there. And I remember he saying, "Hey, read this." And he was showing me a pamphlet of a prison in Lancaster, a yard that was called, at first it was called an honor yard. But then they renamed it to the Progressive Program Facility. And it was a yard where people that most of them had life without were spending their time there, and they didn't have any of the prison politics. They didn't have any of the segregation as far as out in the yard. And he says, "Brother, we can go there and we can take our shoes off and be in the grass and hug each other and nothing would happen to us. And we can eat out in the yard and break bread."
Wow.
And I remember me looking at him and it's man, you're right. And I started inquiring about this yard and everyone was telling me, "You can't go there." And I'm like, "Why?" because no Mexicans can go there. And I'm like, well, and they were saying, well, they actually said no Sureños can go there. And I'm like, well, I'm not a Sureño.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I wouldn't recommend it, bro, because if you go there, you're kind of like throwing
Point of no return.
Yeah, your prison career. And I'm like, well, I did 10 years here. I can do another 10 or 15 years there and maybe 20, and I can probably die there. And in my mind, I'm like, well, that's a place for me to like, I want to just be free from the tyranny of like the Sureños, tyranny of like the underground rules. Yeah. Everything. And so let me go there. And I remember me, it was going to be my annual. Yeah. And I remember me having a discussion with my counselor and said, hey, I'm going to go to the PPF program. And he's like, you can't go there. I'm like, why not? He's like, because you're a Sureño. I'm like, no, I'm not. He's like, well, it says here you and I go, well, yeah, that's what it says, but that's not what I'm.
What does a Sureño mean? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, well, it's a Sureño is basically, if you were from a street gang, then you fall under like a political structure in prison that is Sureño.
It's a Southern California gang member.
That's a special class in prison. When they say that, everybody knows what.
Yeah. So within Mexicans, you're divided in 3 ways. We're actually 4 if you're Latino. I'm gonna put it. You can be another, which is basically you're Central American or South American or Puerto Rican, Caribbean Latino, or you're a Sureño, which is Mexican origin from like street gangs down south, or you can be a Norteño, and there's also the Bulldogs. So you have like different type of classifications. When I went to high desert, because you had Norteños in the yard, just because I was from south, they'll put me in there with a Sureño or someone from down south. Yeah. They'll never put me with a Norteño to live with that's in the cell. So
like Northern California?
Northern Californian Hispanic. Because so and I remember my counselor saying to me when I wanted to go to the PPF program, they're like, you can't go. And I'm like, why not? Yeah, I can go. And he's like, well, I wouldn't recommend it because, once you go there, you can't go anywhere else. I'm like, well, I'll take my chances. They said, I only got like 20 more years to live. I said, I'm good. And I remember I remember the homies would tell me, man, Joe, I don't know if I would hate to see you because you're a good dude. And there's nothing wrong with you, like you don't. And I'm like, brother, it's not a PC yard. It's not a sensitive needs yard. Yeah. Why can I go there? Like, if I'm not with this, wouldn't you want? Like, you don't want me in your business. Yeah. Like, why not? And
I'm out of your way, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm out of your way, and like, and I remember they were just saying, man, you know what? And some of them were like, man, that's a good yard for you, man. Just go. Like some people, really? Some people would be like, you know what? That's good for you, bro. Like, you do good there. Like, you're. I remember when I went, it was just like, it was an amazing yard.
So you finally did get to
go. I went to the PPF yard, against everyone, and I remember when I went there, it was just the most peaceful yard I've never encountered anything like it. But you know what? It lacked in the church.
Oh, man.
So, that was the only downside.
Yeah.
It's like when there is a lot more freedom, for some reason, like there wasn't a dependence. There was too much independence and not dependence on God. Yeah. And, they had all these other like educational programs that to me, I felt like, well, I don't know if I need these programs because they're hitting at the symptoms. And like, I was already cured, because God went to the root, which was my heart, and changed me and transformed me. Like that type of rehabilitation to me was like, I looked at it like, well, I don't know if that's truly transformation. That's rehabilitation, which just is a change of like behavior and habit, but it's not like...
It's not the root.
It doesn't deal with the root of the problem, which is human nature and the heart. Yeah. And so this is the place where it was 2010. It was the place where, my dad came to visit me after... my dad died when I was in prison. This is the last year I saw my dad.
Oh, wow, man.
So, I remember my dad, he came to visit me, and I remember the last visit that I had with him, he said to me, man, like, I think you're going to go home at some point. And I'm looking at my dad like, what makes you think that? He's like, I don't know, this place is different. I can see it. I can see it in your face. I can see it, something's different. And he says, your mom always believed that, and I believe it too. That was the last time I saw my dad.
Wow.
My dad passed away, and like I would say, this is 2010, 2011. I remember that they pushed the law, and the law failed by 1 vote.
So that throws a damper on you.
Yeah, by one vote it got, and I remember me getting a letter from Elizabeth Calvin, who is an attorney for Human Rights Watch, and she's the one that's been on the forefront on this. And I remember she is not giving up, and she's like, look, we lost this battle, but the war still continues. And I'm like, at this point, it's from 2000, you would say 2004 to 20, you're talking about 2011. And I'm thinking it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, this is
That's
not
a lot of time already in between.
Yeah, and we've been defeated. Like, this bill has been defeated over and over and over again. And I'm thinking, well, this is not going to work. This is not going to pass. And I remember I went out to a visit one Saturday, and I met my boss, who is my boss now. I met him in prison because he was there visiting some people, and he tells me, I remember meeting him at visiting room through someone. He says, hey, this is the guy I was talking to you about. And I see this like sharp Jewish guy, and he comes up to me and he says, what's your name? And I tell him my name, and he goes, you a juvenile LWOP? I said, yeah. He's like, I want you to meet someone. And I meet some other guy who works with Elizabeth Calvin, and he worked for Human Rights Watch, and also a priest by the name of Kennedy. And they're saying, hey, don't worry, like, the bill's gonna pass. And I'm like, you think it's gonna pass? I mean, it didn't pass last year. And he's like, it's gonna pass, and it's gonna pass. And I go, are there gonna be any amendments? Because they wanted to amend the bill. I guess the problem with the one person, the assembly person who dropped out at the 11th hour, was that he believed that they had to make these changes. And the change was basically that the people who were the trigger persons shouldn't get relief from this bill. It should just be people who
were in a vehicle or on site when the crime was committed.
When the crime was committed, the non-trigger persons. Yeah. And so he's like, no, it's not. We're gonna go just as it is. We're not gonna amend, because at the time there was only 300 of us in the system.
Yeah.
And so if they were to put that amendment, it would have excluded like more than half.
Yeah.
So they said no, and in 2011, this case by the name of Miller versus Alabama, the attorney is Brian Stevenson. He argues this case before the U.S. Supreme Court, which was an LWOP case. It was a underage. He was actually a 15 or 14-year-old who got life without in Georgia, and he argues that case before the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court says it's unconstitutional to sentence a juvenile to life without the possibility of parole.
Yeah.
There was a catch though to that, but the fact that the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on it, and they made it categorical, an application categorically, that means that anyone who was situated in the same situation as a juvenile being sentenced to life without was gonna find relief. And that was the first time that they ever apply like a rule that only applies to like death penalty cases, that it's categorical, that everyone gets affected. Because they could have ruled and not made it categorical. That's only for like the death penalty cases that they do that. But they said, hey, this is almost like a death sentence, so we're going to apply that category, and we all benefited from that. The only thing is that California is not a mandatory sentence. In California is discretional. It's not a mandatory sentence for juveniles. But then, they went back to the drawing board, they did research, and they found that although it's true theoretically, in practice, they never really applied, the lower sentence. And like judges never use that discretion because, it's weird. You had a state like California, for example. You had a county like San Francisco and Oakland. That no juvenile had ever gotten sentenced in San Francisco with the life without the possibility of parole.
I did not.
And in Oakland, it was like exponentially, like 90% of the juveniles that were getting sentenced to that. So it's like, what's going on here? Yeah. Why such a disparity? So it was obvious that, it was targeting like really minorities,
And for the most part, I think that, this is an era in Los Angeles where lawmakers are fed up. Law enforcement is fed up with the gang violence. I mean, this is not, there's gangs now, but nowhere near the violence that the 80s brought and the 90s, the early 90s brought. No, not even close. I mean, I remember when I first stepped out here, and I saw a dude dressed the part. How we used to dress, and he's at a bus bench with his Walkman on. Like that was the thing to do. Like he didn't look worried one bit, and I knew the whole culture had changed. It wasn't like it used to be because try doing that in the 80s. Try doing that, like dressing the part and just kind of just waiting around in the in a bus bench. Like that's not gonna happen. You're gonna get stabbed, shot, jumped. Something's gonna happen to you if you're just dressed like that. Even being just dressed like that
Yeah.
will get you killed. So I think it was an era where people were just fed up. The crime rate was up the roof. You know, bloodshed on every corner, and it was just so out of control that they just wanted to get rid of the problem. And the way to get rid of the problem is lengthy life sentences, and wow, man.
Yeah, it was used as a deterrent, and like,
Yeah, absolutely.
and like you're right. Like at the time, during the time, like it was gang violence was at its highest point. So when I went back to court, actually, part of my mitigation was an expert to go and like he found like the stats of like the gang violence throughout the years from the 80s all the way to the point where I committed my crime. 1991 was the worst year out of all the gang violence at the time. I remember when they came and they were asking me about like what happened during that year because I committed my crime in November, so it was the end of 1991.
Yeah.
But I remember like that year, like 17 of my friends passed away. I remember going to funerals like every other month or every month, 3, 2, like they were killing us by 2 and 3. And I was just like, and I remember me explaining that to them and they were just like, and so they did research. Part of my mitigation was that, and they found LAPD records and like they found like how many people died in LA in 1991. It was
In the thousands.
it was high. So the response for like LA and for the gang violence was like get harsher with like they declare war on gangs. They declare war on drugs. They it was that era. It was that era. So we got caught up.
The one thing that I didn't get to experience is the gang injunctions because I was already inside. And this is like, I think it's like either mid 90s is when they start doing all that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I wasn't around for that.
Yeah, no, I missed that too. But like it was part of your profile because they were already, they militarized the LAPD.
Yeah.
This is when they got their own crash unit just specifically for gangs. They started profiling gang members.
Take us to those final days when you are in prison and how that information came to you and how you learned of it. And then I'm dying to hear about your first days back. I mean, after 20 years behind bars, dude, the world just had to look strange to you. But so how did that information roll down to you? And these attorneys obviously are working hard on your behalf, which this sounds so great.
Elizabeth Calvin through Human Rights Watch and all these other organizations that, at the time you had ARC, you had ARC, the organization I work for, and you had all these people involved. They're like, hey, the U.S. Supreme Court has spoken. They said it was unconstitutional. Let's push this bill. And without like, it was so fast and so quick that everyone, like all the senators and assembly members said, hey, they signed it.
Wow.
And it passed. So I can tell you the day. It was September 29. Look, it was September 29, 2012. I was in my cell, and he had like the last day was the 29th. September 29 was the last day for him to sign that bill. But that falls on a Sunday, and I'm thinking, hey, it's Friday. I'm calling my attorneys. What's going on? At this time, Loyola it has my case, and I'm like, is he gonna sign the bill? And they're like, well, he hasn't signed it yet. And I'm like, oh, I don't think he's gonna sign it then. And he goes, why do you say that? Because it's the weekend. He doesn't work on the weekend, but he does work. And so they're like, no, he does work. Don't worry about it. I'm like, okay. So I'm here like on the news, trying to like watch the news. At the time, I have my cellmate. He's a Mexican national, and he watches nothing but Univision. And I'm over here surfing the channels. I remember Sunday, 6 p.m., September 29, 2012. I'm looking at the world news because there's nothing local. And my cellmate is like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Hey, you stay on Univision, see if you see anything, if he signs the bill." And I'm over here surfing, and he says, "Hey, I think there's something in the scroll." And I jump,
the banner.
So I'm on the top bunk. I jump down and I look, and it says right there in Spanish, Governor Brown gives juveniles, that were sentenced to cadena perpetua, that were sentenced to life without parole, a possibility. Now,
Man, what did that do to your heart, dude?
Look, I say this. I felt like I was always surviving in prison.
Yeah.
But in that moment, like, I began to live. Like, this was a reality now. Like, it wasn't delusional for me to believe that I was going to be out one day. It wasn't delusional. Like, this was real. And I just remember that at that moment, like, for the first time, like, I felt like I was alive.
That's so powerful. You were living, you were surviving, you were protected, you were doing the best you could with what you had. With that little glimmer of you could head out that gate, and suddenly you wanted to live again. That's an amazing description of what you're saying.
I just want to know, did you get a hold of that crazy Pentecostal dude and write him a wheeler and be like, "Hey, dude,
No,
you were right, bro."
no, seriously. He ended up being in that yard with me.
No way, bro.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they all got to see me, like, leave that prison.
Get paroled from there.
And I remember, like, him hugging me and telling me.
That's powerful, man.
Yeah.
That's powerful, Joe.
I know.
Wow.
I know. And, like, I was the fourth person to get relief under that law, under that bill.
Number 4.
Yeah, number 4. I was the fourth person out. So I remember even, like, everything was so amazing. Like, even me going back to court, and the DA with, like, the special prosecutor from Compton Court. And she was just like, "Well, I've never seen anything like that. This guy spent 21 years in prison. There's no disciplinary, write-up. Yeah. There's nothing. This guy is so clean. Like, how did this happen?" Yeah. And I remember that she tried to oppose, because that was her job, was to oppose me getting my sentence recalled. But I remember that after, the judge, he said he's recalling my sentence. She came up to me, and she put her hand on my shoulder, and she says, "Hey, congratulations. That's amazing," and I'm there celebrating with my attorneys, my parents, and everyone's in the back. Like, the whole Loyola Law School was in the back, and it was just an amazing feeling too.
What did that last night, because I don't know how they did it in Lancaster, but you get that pink slip in your door that you're paroling the next day. What did that feel like, that? Like to you, what was that like?
Well, you know what? It was weird because I have to wait 150 days.
Yeah.
Because I have to go to a parole board hearing.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't just because I have my sentence recalled doesn't mean that was a free ticket out. I still had to go through another process, which is a parole board hearing. And, like, as soon as I go back,
that sounds like that would be hard to wait, man.
Yeah.
The longest couple of days.
Well, once you get found suitable from your parole board hearing, then you have 150 days, because it's a review now. So the board, they have a special board in Sacramento that reviews that, and then it goes, because it was a homicide case, it goes before the governor for 30 days to his office, and he has the last, that's the last process. Yeah, that's the last screening. And so I remember I was at 110 days. I was supposed to get paroled on December 25th. That was going to be my
Christmas?
last day. Yeah, Christmas. I remember my counselor calls me and he says, "Hey, you're going to be out soon, because he's not going to take action on you. And so be expecting you're going home any day now."
Wow.
And on December 1st, 2015, it took me like 3 years.
Wow.
2015, I remember they racked my door early in the morning. Said,
5 a.m.
Transpac, you're going to R&R, and I already knew. Everyone knows.
Yeah, that's the best feeling. Huh?
Yeah.
That's such a good feeling. You're oh man. Yeah. And it's a day that you'll never forget. No. You'll never forget that. You're going on R&R, and
you know what? Like, like, it's something special, to be that moment of that, man, I'm setting free. It's so American. I say it's so American just because freedom means so much to us, and it means so much, especially to someone who has forfeited that.
Yeah.
And so, to me, freedom was like, man, I'm gonna experience, what it is to be home again and like taste my mom's cooking and be able to like spend the night with her. And
Speaking of cooking, what was your first meal when
oh
you touched down?
man, honestly my I had this thing that I wanted to eat a steak, and it was a ribeye steak.
You had a ribeye steak.
Yeah, a ribeye steak.
That's the
Yeah.
best ribeye steak. You're
Oh
chasing
yeah,
that first meal, huh?
yeah. It was the best ribeye steak. But you know what? Like 3 months later, and you know that feeling was like I thought there was never gonna be a feeling that was gonna kind of like compared to that feeling of being released. Through my boss, I went back to prison. I went back to the same yard. I was able to go back into the prison at parole from, bro.
What?
Yeah. So Common was throwing a concert, and my boss was the one that kind of like organized that.
Yeah.
And he says, "Hey, you want to come to Lancaster?" And I'm like, "I don't."
Oh,
He goes,
man.
"I'll get you in there. Don't worry. You want to come?" I said, "Yeah." I'm not gonna lie, bro. I went back to that yard, and when I stepped in there, the men, when they saw me, bro, like crying, like, you know, I hugged people that I spent, you know,
Years with.
years and had life without, but for them to see me out and to come back, it was tangible proof that, hey, this is real.
Yeah.
Like, I brought so much hope to these men, you know, and like to see that, like, you know, and I compare it that was the greatest feeling ever, because, you know, I cried with these men there.
Yeah.
And like they saw me and they held me and they knew that at some point, you know, that was going to be a reality for them. And I remember, like, you know, I used this description, like when the American soldiers went into Auschwitz, and the Jewish people, like when they saw the soldiers, and that something lit up to them, like
Hope came alive.
Hope came alive, and that's how it felt. I remember, you know, Common was there. We went into the unit where I was at, and everyone, instead of going with Common, they came to me.
Well, yeah, you're one of their own.
You know, it's like, and I'm like, "Hey, guy, this is Common." Like, you know, it's like, "Hey, what's up, Common?" Like, you know.
Wow. Man.
And I remember, you know, so I opened up his concert. My boss is like, "You're gonna speak to these men." And I remember when I went into the stage, like everything was quiet. It was like a pin drop. And I spoke to these men, you know, and they were just like so excited, so happy, cheered me. And like, you know, Common acknowledged it. It's like, whoa, like, man, like, you know, and so it was very, very special. That to me was the greatest feeling. It even surpassed my release, just because it was more collective. It was more of like,
you're coming in as proof.
Yeah.
That God exists, that God moved heaven and earth for you.
Yeah. And a lot of these men are out now, you know, because the governor pardoned them. Like, it's just so amazing to see now that, you know, I go now and I see these men out, and, you know, we spent so many years together, and to be able, and they always say, like, "Man, I remember the day you came back, bro." Like, that's when I really like sunk in that this is real.
You know, the power of a second chance. The power of a second chance is like none other, man. To know that you messed up in life. And you know what I like about Joe, because I've had conversations with him, is that nowhere in your speech, bro, is there a victim mentality. Nowhere in your speech is, you know, "I didn't deserve this. I didn't," you know, and blaming, you know, society or whatever. You took responsibility for what happened, and to me that's the proof of someone that has been changed by the power of the gospel, by God Himself. And that second chance, man, you treasure. You know, every one of us that has been out, we treasure that second chance. It's not a light thing, you know, and that's the difference between getting out and just going through rehabilitation, man-made rehabilitation, and coming out a changed man because of the Holy Spirit, because of God proving Himself alive in our hearts, you know. And man, I want to get to these parts, because I think this. I hope you're enjoying this conversation here. You're out in your car, and maybe you're, you know, on a long drive, and maybe by the time we release this episode, you know, we're off of quarantine, and you just made a parole. But you're listening to this, and I'm hoping that you understand, like, this is a real story. This is what really takes place. And but I want to get to the point where, you know, you're out. What are you doing now, bro? Like, what have you? Because I'm not gonna say it. I want you to say it. I want you to say it because
Yeah.
you went a little bit further on and just like just reading books. You did something that's very, an accomplishment that wow, man, hats off to you. What is it that you did?
Man, I finished school, so I went back to college. So I went back to college and I got a degree. So yeah, I majored in it's a liberal arts major with concentration in philosophy, politics, and history. So yeah, I went back to school and like so this I've been out since 2015 and 4 years of experience the college life. That's been my life. So it was last semester. I was supposed to like I finished in the fall of 2019. I was supposed to walk this spring, but because of COVID-19, I'm not gonna walk anymore. But I got my diploma already, and but yeah, that was always a longing for me, and it was always a dream to be able to get a higher education. And now I'm thinking about grad school if that's for me. I don't know if that's something that I'll pursue just because it would like I'm already in my mid 40s and it would lead me back into the my late 40s or 50s and so it's a big step, especially if I continue kind of like in political philosophy. It's more of like a PhD program than a master's program, so it's a lot more years in education and whether I want to be a professor or not, it's but yeah, that's I went back to school and that was big, like it was a big challenge for me because of my age and
You're like a Rodney Dangerfield there at that point, right?
yeah. I am right.
But that's good stuff, man.
Although people say, man, you don't look your age, but it's one of those things that
you've been frozen in time, man.
I remember my social worker said, "Oh, you're pickled."
You're pickled. Yeah. There you go.
Prison pickles.
That's another way of looking at it. Yeah.
So I went back to school and like right now I'm working for my nonprofit and I'm considering whether I should go back to school or continue doing I think that at the end of the day I will be involved in some type of although my job is not ministry related, but it's almost that because I'm serving, my population. I'm serving people who are coming out of prison and who want to reintegrate back into society. So I work in the housing department of my organization, which we provide housing for people who are now coming after serving. We have people now who are in our housing who have served 40 years. They went in there when they were 19 years old and they're out. They're in their late 60s now. And it's sad because, like you said, the first thing that you encounter when you get out is that the world has changed. It's all technology now, and that's very intimidating. I mean, it was intimidating for me. Just imagine someone who's now old and, like, they're so terrified of the phone.
Yeah.
Like, it's just because, everything you do now involves a phone, and it involves you having passwords and username and like it's so demoralizing to them. Like, why do I have to do this? Why can't I just go? And it's
why can't I just write a letter?
Dear
whomever,
it doesn't
I'm
work
out.
that way. It doesn't work that way. So they're just terrified. So and it's harder for them to get jobs. And so my organization provides jobs for them, careers, provides housing.
Wow.
So
awesome.
that's what I do in that sense. So I'm still serving in some small capacity.
And what's that program called?
It's called the Anti-Recidivism Coalition.
ARC?
Yeah, ARC.
Wow, man. That's some good stuff, Joe, man. What a great...
What about your family? Do you have a wife or you...
No, I don't have a wife. I'm single. I'm looking for a good Christian woman.
He's available, ladies. And ladies, I was going to say ladies and gentlemen. That wouldn't be good. Ladies, that's a single band right here, man.
Hey, my pastor tells me, be careful what you wish for.
That's right.
You have no idea.
and he's educated. So that's some good stuff, Joe, man. Yeah. So you're helping out here. It to me, that's ministry, though, man. Like, that's because I'm sure that you've had these conversations with some of these individuals and you're giving them the gospel at some point. You're sharing stories. Some of them have done time with you. But it's an incredible life, man. I'm floored that, and I'm grateful that, one, that you gave us the opportunity to share your story. Two, I'm grateful to God that He spared your life while you were in there. You served Him from day one, pretty much.
Yeah.
And you didn't you you didn't turn to the right, and you didn't turn to the left. You looked at the goal, and the goal was to please God, to live for Him, and God honored. He honored your walk, brother. He honored your walk. He honored your loyalty to Him. In these gangs, we always talked about loyalty. Loyalty was a big thing, and we found out that that's they're not even close to that word. But when you're loyal to the Lord, man, He opens doors that no man can shut, and that's what He did with your life, man. And I'm so glad, number one, to know you as a brother in the Lord, and two, to share these moments. It takes a lot for anybody to come into a podcast and just be open with their life, man. What would you say, to someone that's just getting out, who thinks, this is going to be a culture shock? It's a whole new, a whole new world when you come out. New buildings, new type of cars. And you don't even need a key no more. They're push starts. What would you say to that one guy, or that one young lady that just served time? What would you say to them? What kind of advice would you have for someone that just comes out?
I think my first advice to them would be like, you have to take it very slow. I remember like the image of chew slowly.
Yeah.
And, I think you have to like allow, the integration back to be slow.
Yeah.
Because if you think that, someone who's done so much time, like it's a whole new world, and not only that, you're gonna face new stressors in life that you never had to face when you were in prison.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna just put one, like family reunification is huge.
Yeah.
You're not just gonna come out here. You're a grown man now. You're not gonna just come out here and live with your brother who's married and has kids.
Oh man.
You're not gonna live with your mother anymore because she's living maybe somewhere else where it's just so hard for someone, like housing, work, like what do you do now? Like now you have a record. Like there's still this stigma, and you still have to overcome these things, and that's part of the consequences of our actions.
Yeah.
But it becomes very like demoralizing, because now you're like, okay, I'm out, but I can't get a job because of my criminal record. I can't even get an apartment because I have no credit, no social,
There's no history,
no credit history. I have a record that so it becomes very challenging. And thank God for organizations like the one I work for, and other organizations that provide resources and support, and with people who understand what you're going through. And I think that that's kind of like my first thing, is to like, hey, be involved with these organizations that are gonna help you and support you, because you need a lot of support. Because then once the job interview is scary as well.
Yeah.
Because you have no history. Like, what do you say to a job interview? Like, what was your last job? What do you say to him? Like,
what'd you do for the last 21 years?
I mean, think about it. So, thank God that I was able to have people around me to help me. And like, I went to a Christian school, so that was huge. Because, I started off at junior colleges, and, it was just so, it came to a point that I was going to give up, just because, everything was taught against, everything that I believed.
Yeah.
And, biology classes, and, it was just so hard for me. And I just felt like I couldn't find myself.
Yeah.
This is not the intellectual honesty that I was expecting. And it wasn't until, I go to a liberal arts college that was a Christian college, where I really started, like challenging these big ideas, but with a perspective of like God. It's weird because, I remember at the beginning of this segment, I said that I never felt like I was American. I never felt that I was Mexican. I never felt that I was, Salvadorian. But it wasn't until like Christianity came into my life, and me embracing who I am in Christ, that I felt very American. Yeah. That I love freedom more than anything. And so my second thing would be to anyone getting down, it's like freedom is beautiful.
It is,
Liberty
man.
is beautiful.
It
Living
is.
life is beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, so
Amen, man. Joel Needler, you got any other last parting comments here?
Oh man, that was a great story. Thank you for sharing so much about your life, Joel. And God bless you in your continued journey. Um, and I hope you find a Proverbs 31 wife at some point.
That's right.
hey, you know what my pastor says, you know, Joe, you know, he's like, the only freedom you have is to marry a Christian woman. That's it. And I'm just like, can I evangelize someone who's not a Christian? They're like, no.
Doesn't work that way. Nice try.
Yeah, it's hard.
But thanks, man. Thanks for coming on. It's great to meet you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Joel, for your time, man, and your story. What a wonderful story, and we hope that it brings a lot of new hope to our listeners. And if you're out there, we are so thankful that you tune in and listen to this podcast. We're going to keep bringing stories like this and stories that are alike, stories that carry weight, stories that you could see redemption, right in that story. And I just want to say thank you to all our listeners out there. God bless you. And stay tuned, because the next person that we're going to be interviewing is another individual with an amazing story himself. His name's Rudy, and he's going to be with us on Monday. And what a wonderful story of redemption that one is as well. So don't miss out. Make sure that you subscribe to the Shot Collar Podcast, and that you press on that subscribe button, beat it up, step on it, drop kick it, punch the lights out of that subscribe button. Make sure that you clock in at the Shot Collar Podcast. Thank you so much. God bless you. Jesus is the answer.